The starters, I'd like to welcome the starters event group to their inaugural meeting. Last winter, NOC initiated this event group program in efforts to get each one of the groups, well, during COVID, organizing event groups so that people could keep connected, even though they weren't maybe doing as many meets as we normally do. So far, all of the event groups have really embraced this and enjoyed the camaraderie and the information
What's
that's
that?
been imparted. So I know you didn't sign in to
I'll need
listen.
it for here.
So I will turn it over to Ian Gordon and Lisa Ferdinand.
Hi, Jane. Thanks very much. Serge, can you just let me know if everyone's in who's going to be signing in, or?
Yep. And I just want to ask everyone to mute yourself and turn on your camera if you want to have a better recording. Thank you.
Okay, guys. Well, let's get going. The goal was to actually have it for about 45 minutes, so we're hoping we can stick to that. So as Jane said, welcome all. I'm just going to go through a few things just over the agenda, and then we'll get started. So, Mr. Gordon. Great. So we're going to go through the introductions, just the program overview, and then we'll get right into the false start versus misconduct discussion and future meetings. And then we actually have a survey that's ready to go, which we will send out right after the call. Okay, just real quick by way of introduction, I'm not sure if everyone knows who I am. Most of you should know who I am, I think. But in addition to what's already on your screen, I just wanted to let you guys know that I think Ian and I are probably the same vintage. We've been doing this for 35 years now. So we've got a little bit of experience, and we're actually looking forward to hosting this group and seeing what we can actually put together for the starters and what kind of best practices and professional development we can develop. All yours, Ian.
I can't, I'm in a meeting, honey.
Yeah, there's the two of us that are facilitators.
This is the guy that did my,
And I think,
in
Lisa,
Edmonton.
if you can talk a little bit about, introduce yourself, if you've got anything else, or are you good?
No, I've left it with what's on the screen. I think everyone can see.
Okay. And likewise, I've been doing this, as Lisa says, for over 30 years. So we're willing to share our knowledge and are willing to disseminate what we know and try and get a common thread throughout the country. As Jane mentioned, this program was set up by NOC to encourage development and growth of officials, in this case starters, through best practices and professional development, especially when we couldn't meet and go to meets together. The topics are as much as possible determined by the group. Lisa and I are only leads to facilitate meetings and help circulate information and communications, etc.
Yeah, and if I may interrupt, please, could we ask whoever is not speaking to mute their microphone, please?
Yeah, that would be Serge. Are you able to mute everyone's microphone? Serge?
Lisa, sometimes he has to step away So he
Okay.
starts the recording and then sometimes steps away. Whoever is Neil, yes, thank you. You've now muted. But if everybody bottom left, I think, of your computer, if you could please mute yourselves, we can give our full attention to Lisa and Ian.
Yeah,
Okay. I just,
okay, there we
you-
go.
just one second, Ian, before you get going. I just wanted to add that, and maybe Jane can speak to this a little bit more. In the information that was sent out with the notice, it mentions about mentoring. And I just wanted to just clarify that this is not mentoring. There is a mentoring program that has been set up by NOC. This is more for sharing of information and experience, and hopefully providing some of the starters with information that they may not have access to. So if that's not the case, Jane, could you just let us know?
No, Lisa, you're totally correct on that. I guess this is a form of mentoring in that you and Ian are giving your information or sharing information with us, but it's not a quote formal mentoring. No.
Right. Thanks a lot. Okay, Ian, all yours.
Okay, just for, I just thought I'd add or start with a video. And what is a false start and versus what is misconduct? So here is a video.
200-meter PB back on June 7th in Oslo, running a 998. And Brown says Andre DeGrasse wants to be the world's fastest man. Well, I want to be a part of that conversation too. There he is, lane 5 and 6. You notice?
Okay, I can replay this. And it's a matter of, this was called back on, and there was a false start charged, and whether that is appropriate or not is something that we can
Jerome
discuss.
in Burnaby. He's coming off his 200-meter PB back on June 7th in Oslo, running a 998.
If you watch lane 1 in
Brown says
particular,
Andre DeGrasse wants to be the world's fastest man. Well, I want to be a part of that conversation too. There he is, lane 5 and 6. You notice?
okay. So let's just take a look at the rules. A false start is commencement of the start before receiving the report of the gun, and this includes initiation of movement that was not stopped and continued into the commencement of the start. If the athlete's feet have not left contact with the foot plates of the blocks, or the hands have not lost contact with the ground, it's generally not considered a false start. Second part, if the starter determines that prior to receiving the report of the gun, an athlete initiated a movement that was not stopped and continued into the commencement of the start, it shall also be a false start. Okay. When you go to misconduct, there's 3 parts to that. And if you look at the third part, and it's, we've highlighted the word movement, but the starter shall abort the start where the athlete disturbs other athletes through sound, movement, or otherwise. So that was, and there seems to be, or has been, a lot of discussion about then what constitutes a false start, what is movement that is necessary for a false start versus misconduct. And at this point, we thought, well, we'd like to throw it open to people to be able to discuss and say what their experiences are, and if they've had problems with this, and etc.
I think Ian, we might want to go over what the outcome of that particular video was.
Yes. So you can see when you look at the
Sorry, Jerome. Edinburgh would be coming
lane
up.
one,
It's 200-meter PB.
you
back
can
on
see the
57, Oslo,
movement,
running 998.
but they did
And
not.
Brown says Andre DeGrasse wants to be the world's fastest man. Well, I want to be a part of that conversation too. There he is, lane 5. And 6, you notice.
Okay. So you can see that was recalled on and the starter actually had said that lane 1 was a false start. Lane 1 appealed to the start referee, and the start referee let this athlete restart and compete under protest. And in this case, the athlete did not appeal the decision after the fact. This was a heat, so they did not make the semifinal or would not have made the semifinal and decided not to appeal. Although it didn't go to jury, in all likelihood, it would have been overturned.
Okay. So I think what we were looking to do is to discuss with the group any of the situations they may have encountered that may not be as cut and dry as what people were looking at on the video. So there are a number of things that constitute a false start, all of which implies that they leave the blocks before the report of the gun. But there's some other things that play into it when it comes to misconduct versus a false start. And in this case, it wasn't necessarily a false start. And because the athlete's hands and feet actually didn't leave the blocks. But when was this video, Ian?
This was 2018. So there's no change in the rules on this portion since that time. And that the word movement went into the misconduct portion of the rules in 2018. So that portion was already in. And the portion of the rules, of course, stating that the hands, if the athlete's feet have not lost contact with the foot plates, the blocks, etc., that's been in there for several iterations of the rules.
Okay. So with regards to the false start was clear in that instance. With regards to misconduct, it isn't necessarily as clear as false start. There are a number of things that can impact misconduct. One of them could be sound in the surrounding area, an act of God or extraneous circumstances that may cause the athlete to either put their hands up to try and abort the race or have the starter try to stop the race.
Yeah.
Is that you or is that them?
No, it's me. I think 'cause I'm too close.
Folks, is it possible to turn your microphones off, please? Okay, all right. So we were talking about misconduct. There are also instances where an athlete can request a delay or put their hands up to try and request a delay, provided they have a reason or an adequate reason to abort the start. One of the things that we wanted to do was to find out from you guys whether or not there were any situations that you have been in that were either situations you weren't quite sure whether or not it was misconduct or a false start. And as Ian mentioned earlier, this is intended to be a discussion. So we're looking for folks to provide their input on experiences they may have had dealing with false starts versus misconduct. So does anyone have anything they'd like to share?
Hi, Lisa. This is Jennifer talking, and Ian. I noticed on that video, both lane 1 and lane 3. Lane 3 was a slow rise, in my opinion. Just seen it not falling really immediately and without delay. That's my comment.
Dean, do you want to, can you click on the video just to?
Coming off his 200-meter PB back on June 7th in Oslo, running a 9.98. And Brown says Andre DeGrasse wants to be the world's fastest man. Well, I want to be a part of that conversation too. There he is, lane 5. And 6, you notice.
So in that instance, how long would you say a delay or a slow riser would be? Because he seemed to be ready at the top there. Oops.
Yeah, I guess I agree that it was slower than the rest, and that is something that it becomes a judgment. And I guess what we're asking for is comments, whether you've seen instances like this in your at your various meets that you've been involved in starting.
Just to add to this, this is a good video to work with when you have your start crew and you're holding that, you know, you've got your start referee and all the starters there, to have a discussion about how you are going to deal with this, or preparing them to say, because there's 2 incidences here. What are we going to deal with? How are we going to deal with this? What is everyone's decision? So we sort of get a common ground idea in our head, what the ruling will be that we'll come up with.
Yeah, and that's a very good point Jennifer raises. And I think in general, when a starter is looking at, or at least when I'm starting, what I'm looking at is a sequence of events that are transpiring. So for instance, if there were 2 athletes in this regard, in this race that happened to break, one athlete was moving and another athlete broke, and another athlete, 3 athletes broke along the course of the race, how do you sort of determine who the false start should be charged to? And in that instance, what I tend to do, what I do actually, is look at the sequence of events. So did one of the athletes twitch, which drew another athlete to move? And if the athlete, say in lane 2 twitched and lane 3 went, if lane 8 also ends up going, did they go at the same time? Was it independent of the start or of the movement or the break in lane 3? And those are the types of things you have to look at. And a lot of times you're going to be doing that so quickly, you have to try and get the information processed in your brain quite quickly in order to make a decision. In an instance like that, which is something that I did have to deal with, it ended up being a misconduct and a false start to the athlete in lane 8, because they were so far apart that there was no way that movement in lane 2 was going to draw someone in lane 8. So
I could, if it's Ken Searle, I'm from Kamloops. A couple of comments, and I'll try and keep them specifically with the lane 1. I don't think he went back to his original starting position. And I don't think he ever stopped moving. And that may, it's possible, and this might be an example of that, in which all the contact is still there, but the athlete is still moving. And so that must be called. I guess this is the issue between a false start and a misconduct. I thought perhaps the hold was quite long, and I like that, but I thought the actual start itself was a little quicker perhaps than would be expected. I guess I'm wondering where in the track meet did this happen? Was this the first race in the day? Had there been 2 or 3 days, et cetera, et cetera? I guess it wasn't really clear to me, but I didn't also like the setting up of lane 4. I would have stood them up, I think, if it was fairly early in the meet. It seemed to be lane 4 was diddling around with the race. So I just didn't really like several of the aspects with the race. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks for the comments. And if there's a big difference between being there kind of in the heat of the moment and of course actually seeing it after the fact. This was at a national championship where you have, in theory, you should have full heats. You should have a full heat of 8. And this is, I think there were 3 heats of 8 to go to a final. And I can't remember whether this was first, second, or third heat, but in any case, you had what was it, the pre-meet qualifiers in the day before, and of course you only had 1 or 2 or 3 going into the 24 for the main event.
Can you show it again so we can focus on lane 4 to look after Ken's comment, please?
Burnaby is coming off his 200-meter PB back on June 7th in Oslo, running a 9.98. Brown says Andre DeGrasse wants to be the world's fastest man. Well, I want to be a part of that conversation too. There he is, lane 5 and 6. You notice.
So, if I may,
go ahead.
If this was Ottawa in 2018, I was on the start team there. I don't remember this particular start. I think I might have been on the tower for it.
You were not the starter on this.
Okay.
But you were one of the recallers on this.
Yeah. So what this start illustrates to me is, of course, there's 2 ways to false start. One by having your hands or feet break before the gun, and the other to be in the continuous act of starting when the gun fires. That's the harder call. This athlete seemed to be getting back down into his set and not going forward at the time of the start. So I don't think it's a false start on that score, but to Ken's point, it may have caused the start to last so long that it had to be recalled, had to be stood up just to get a fair start for everybody.
To me, I agree with your comment completely. There was something else on this. When you look at you always have to examine the position of the starter and the recallers. And this camera was basically on a pole about maybe 5 to 10 meters in front of the start.
Jerome in Burnaby.
So yeah, you can kind of tell from the angle. It was a really good angle to see this. And it was quite high up, so that the much higher up than any of the recallers or the starter. So that's a good point. And I guess, and others may comment on this. When you take a look at, to make a decision, to me is, if the gun had not gone off at the time that it did, would have that person in lane 1 gone? Or would have they stayed? And to me, that becomes as important as, are they imperceptibly moving forward or backwards? Or have they got back to their original position?
I have another comment about this, and it has to do with the setup. You look at lane 3 and lane 4 compared to everybody else who was already in position. Lane 4's got his hand ahead of the line, and lane 3 has got his left hand also. I can't tell for sure if it's a shadow or not. It doesn't look like it. So it tells me that those two have not. Now he moves his hand back in his left hand back. So it tells me that those two are taking quite a bit longer to settle than everybody else. And that alone can just interrupt the whole cadence of the start. And I didn't like this.
Yes, and it's a matter of, that's a judgment, isn't it? As to how long do you tolerate a delay? If it's a second or two, or if it's 10 seconds, makes a difference.
Ian, can I, there are a couple of comments that I wanted to put out there if everyone hasn't seen them. One of the starters wanted to know exactly where the positioning of the starter and the recall starter was. Do you remember? Were you able to set that up from this video?
The starter was on the infield, but probably, I would say, 8 or 10 meters in front of the start line, and maybe, if I had to guess, maybe 5 meters from lane 1. So it was more of a front look than a side look.
And the recallers?
There was a recaller, I think, probably maybe 5 meters forward of the line and back from lane 8. If I had to guess, maybe 5 meters. And you also had a recaller. If I go back.
Meter PB back on June 7th in Oslo.
That's a recaller here behind.
Pretty good coverage on the start.
Pardon, sorry?
Sorry, I said there was pretty good coverage on the start.
Oh, yes, there was. There were at least 2 recallers, and I think there were 3.
So the decision that the team took, Ian, on this, they all saw that the athlete pulse started. So they believe that he left before the report of the gun, or was he in motion during the report of the gun?
I was not privy to any discussion of the starter and recallers, but the starter did say that it was a false start. And I don't know, Darren, do you remember anything?
No, I don't. If I was a recaller, it would either have been Mike Stenson or, geez, I forgot the name of the guy from Quebec on the stand.
Oh, Jean-Francois.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, it was Jean-François. Hi, this is Chantal from Quebec. And there was Jean-François, Darren, myself, and somebody else. We were 4. And Ian and Mike Stenson
I'm
were.
not getting any sound at all now. It's been fine up till now. I've muted my mic because they asked us to.
go ahead.
37 participants, but I don't know what's going on now.
Dennis, we can hear you.
Ian Fisher here, just being the national championship, I'm quite interested. There was no SIS system involved. And I wonder why not. That might have resolved any issue if there was any kind of an issue with this kind of a start. But in my point of view, there was no issue at all. Lane 1 is gone. But why was there no SIS?
That would be a question for Athletics Canada.
No sound.
We can hear you, Dennis.
No. I gotta be careful because
Dennis, we can hear you.
so I muted. We were all asked to mute.
Lisa,
Headset.
Yeah.
this is John.
Was
I
working
think there's
before,
still
but
debate
they're
whether or
talking and I
not the
can't hear
group of
anything.
starters would false start lane 1. I wouldn't. But
I could hear them
but
before.
Dennis seems to
There
think
also was
like,
an arrow for me to scroll this up or down. There are 37 people, and I was able to scroll them up and down. That's Lisa. I don't know why she got Houston Dexter, and Ian
Dennis,
Gordon
we
is
can
in
hear
here.
you.
Whoever is the
So they've
host
been
of the
talking about
meeting
the
can
SIS
mute
system. It's
Dennis.
pretty rare that we work with
So
it.
if
the
you're
host
the-
should mute
If
everybody.
you're the host of the
There's
meeting,
also a
you
track
can
referee.
mute Dennis.
Oh, here now this is up here. It wasn't before.
Sarish is the one who's hosting.
It's muted.
Do we have a co-host that can also mute?
Sorry,
No,
stop
we don't
video
have-
to choose from.
Do we have control, Ian?
No,
I found I can control
size
individual
of the picture.
people, but that
No, it was working before. I'm
not
not hearing anything now.
And, Sarish, are you on the line?
I've sent Dennis chat messages to mute.
Mute.
Thank you. Done. Okay, sorry. John was speaking. Go ahead, John.
Thanks, Lisa. It sounds like there's still debate on whether or not we would false start lane 1. I wouldn't, because his feet and hand, it looks like his feet and hands didn't leave the track. If they didn't, that's not a false start. But a couple other starters are saying they would have booted him. So maybe we should start with that. Because I had another
disagree that That's
question
the only
about.
just criteria for a false start. Forward motion at the time of the gun without leaving your hands or feet is also a false start.
I understand that, but in my opinion, he looks like he came back.
That's what we agreed on.
Well,
So
what
can
do
you-
I missed that.
We
I'm
did
saying
say
he
that
came
it's an
back
unfair
down.
start.
oh, wait a second, folks. Please don't talk over each other. So,
Okay.
John Caulfield?
I was saying, call him back, not calling it as a false start, but an unfair start.
Okay. So, Darren and Chantal are probably the only ones on the call who were actually there next to Ian. What do you guys think?
I think it was an unfair start and I'm glad it was recalled, but it should not have been a false start.
Chantal?
I would say the same.
Okay.
Because he had his feet and his hands were still on the track. So
he was still allowed to run. Ian, you were the referee.
I was on the jury. And actually, after the 30 minutes had expired and there was no appeal, I decided to go and look at this in detail. And my conclusion was that this should probably not have been a false start. And I I still believe that, and coming back to an earlier comment is if the gun had not gone at that exact moment, I don't believe lane one would have left the blocks. So it was not a rolling start.
May I ask, just in terms of applying this in the future for me as a junior starter, if you're sitting there watching this and you see that movement, I think I would expect a recall. And then when you talk about it, I know the word buck has been used. I don't, his hands and feet didn't leave. It's not a false start. Wouldn't you look to the adjoining lanes like 2 and 3 to say, were they drawn off or something? Like, how do you connect in the impact of his movement on the people who could reasonably see him?
Impacting in what way? I'm sorry.
Well, I would think, like, if you're going to say, I mean, I'm trying, so the guy clearly, I think I've heard it called a buck, but he clearly moved before the start, but his hands and feet didn't leave the ground.
Yeah.
So it's perfectly legitimate recall. Like any of us seeing that would recall because we'd see the movement. We wouldn't be in a position at that point to calculate the impact on the whole start. Then you chat about it and you say, yeah, but he didn't leave the ground and nobody was drawn off close to him. And then we've talked about, like, I think it was 7 and 8 who are completely unrelated, wouldn't have seen him. So if that comes up later, that's an unrelated thing that wasn't recalled. Isn't it, like I'm struggling with the notion of misconduct in the sense so then at the end of the day, he should get a warning for moving after the set? Is that where we're at in terms of the proper intervention at the line? Like how it's a proper recall. It's not a false start. And then at the line, what you would expect the referee to do is to give him a caution. Is that like just walking it through what would happen at the meet as opposed to 3 days later?
Okay.
How would we deal with it on the line?
So if this same similar instance happened and the athlete's hands and feet did not leave the blocks, he was moving. If the recall, which happened, occurred, what they could do is give him the yellow card. And that would be the end of it. And then we start the race. But in doing so, if the athlete were to go on to the next round, for instance, or another event, another running event during the day, if the same thing happens again, then the athlete would be disqualified from the meet. So, yeah, to your point, if there wasn't a recall and they didn't false start him, then that would have been the way it should have been played out, according to the recallers that are there.
And that, to me, that seems like a perfectly equitable way to resolve his behavior at the line. And he's warned, he settles down, and you move on to the next race.
Yep, you're absolutely right. And that was a very good question. And those are the types of things we're looking to have conversations about. We want to know how you guys are seeing these things, and we want to hear your comments about what you are dealing with or have dealt with, and what we can do as a group to talk things out. Oh, John Cofield.
I was thinking that you also need to talk to lane 3 and lane 4 because their delay in responding to the set command probably caused lane 1 to have the twitch.
And again, I'm the one who's looking at it just like you guys are. One of the things that I do know about these videos is that what we're seeing is not necessarily what actually happened. And when someone is, well, I shouldn't say it that way. Of course, what you see on the video is what happened, but the perspective that we have, I think, may be deceiving in certain regards. So again, I have to defer to Darren and to Chantal because they were the ones who had eyes on the race. So either of you want to comment, Baron or Chantal? No?
Oh, thanks.
Okay.
My comment on that, yes, on video, lane 3 looks like a slow rise. And yeah, it was a little bit slower. But you do have very frequently in races, somebody coming up a little bit faster, a little bit slower. And this was probably not out of range. It was not outrageous. And it kind of looks like maybe it was on the video, but when you see it, something like this live, I didn't think it was outrageous. It was just a tad slower. And the hold was long enough that everybody was still prior to that movement in lane 1.
Okay.
So that's my comment.
Okay. We've got one more. Becca has a question.
Hi. So one thing I do want to mention, I was just kind of looking at the rule book again, because even though there is forward motion, like, because in the rules, rule 16.7, it says in the case of a crouch start, as any motion by an athlete that includes or results in one or both feet losing contact with the foot plates, like, even though there was forward motion, and a lot of people perceive it as the forward motion, depending on who you're talking to, the fact that his feet did not leave is indicative that it was not a false start. There was just a lot going on in this start that, the moment, if I was on the starting stand with all those different variables and elements going on, I would just stand them up and just, recall it and, start again, basically. And, yeah, like, those are just some comments that I would notice, like, even just with all of those elements going on just from the set, those were a lot of red flags to me, just with the speed and with the inconsistent. And yeah, everyone's not going to be perfectly in sync. Like, I've been in some senior men's starts where all the guys come up at once and it's perfect. They're all in sync, they're all focused, but they are humans at the end of the day. They're not going to be perfectly in sync. And but you also don't want them to dilly-dally. So, but yeah, those are just my comments.
Those are good comments. Does anyone else have any questions or comments before we move on?
Oh, I'm back in. I still don't have any sound.
Somebody mute Dennis, please, quickly. Okay.
I have another question, Lisa.
Okay, go ahead, John.
What you mentioned earlier about have we seen stuff like this before? And then you were talking about when an athlete like requests a delay. Could you maybe give some examples of when you think it's appropriate for an athlete to request a delay?
Yeah.
Because I've had issues where I think they were unreasonable, and to me that's misconduct. That's intentional misconduct.
I mean, if an athlete's block slips or their the mechanism on their block lifts, then they're valid reasons. If there's something on the track, if you look up the track and the starter is looking at the athlete, and there happens to be something that's come across the track or an implement that landed on the track, I mean, there are a number of things that are not necessarily explicable, but that could happen, that could warrant an athlete aborting a race or requesting an abort. The hard fact about it, most of the time an athlete will try and pull one over on you. They'll try and delay the race. They don't feel ready. There's many times an athlete will put up their hands and they have no reason for why they wanted to put up their hand, because their coach either told them that's what they need to do if they don't feel ready, which is outside of what the rules say, because you're not allowed to do that. So it depends. I'm just trying to think of any other sequences. I mean, going forward, what we can do is actually have more videos for us to analyze, and a lot of that is what I was going to talk about next, is what you guys, or where you guys want this to go. We sort of just put this this topic together just to get people's juices flowing, to see what other types of things you might want to discuss or see, or activities you might want to do. So if no one else has any other questions, I'm just going to move on to the next bit real quick. We should.
Lisa, if I could just add further to what was just asked about when an athlete puts his hand up for delay, I think that's where the starter's assistant's opinion should be. Well, let me back that up. The chief starter's assistant will not turn the start over to the starter until he or she has ascertained that everything is perfect. Everything is quiet, blocks are set, the track down the track is clear, there's no garbage on the track, hurdles are on, and so on and so on. So I think it's incumbent on the chief starter's assistant to make sure, and the fact that he or she is also, in most cases, the closest to the athlete to see if there's any kind of an issue. We did have an issue. Ian was there in 2012, 100 meter hurdle final, last event of the meet, Olympic qualification. Athlete false started and pleaded a mosquito buzzed in her way. I was standing there 4 meters from the athlete. There was no mosquito, but so that we didn't have any hassle and delayed the thing, she was allowed to run under protest, was disqualified afterwards. But so you need to rely on the whole team to see what's going on. And in my experience, when an athlete puts her hand up, it's not justified. It could be playing games or it's a mental thing on their part.
Most definitely. And that's a lot of times that's what it is. And when we come to roles and responsibilities, including the essays, I think we can have a robust discussion about, games that athletes play and who needs to deal with them and how to go about dealing with them as well. But that was a very good point. Any other questions or comments? No? Okay, we got to get moving. Just just a few clarifications for us going forward. The meeting start time, we chose 8 o'clock because we were trying to incorporate the folks out west and out east because they're on the extremities of these the meeting times. So what we wanted to do is find out, folks out in BC and the folks out in the Maritimes, does this time work for you?
Yeah, good for Nova Scotia.
Okay. Darren?
Yeah, no, it's late, but we'll have to, we have to put up with it for the BC people. It's fine.
It's good for Newfoundland too.
Okay, thanks, George. How about BC? You guys are early, so does
That's
that
good
work?
for me.
Well, we get Saturday night hockey early, so we're happy. We have to accommodate the center of the universe.
BC was good. BC.
Yep.
Yep.
We're good.
Okay.
Good
So
for Manitoba too.
Excellent. Because I know you guys are 2 hours behind and then BC 3 hours behind. So it makes a big difference when we're trying to plan this. So 8 o'clock works for folks. That's great. Frequency of meetings. We were looking at doing these the first Monday of every month during indoor season, and then we'd see afterwards. Does that work for folks? Oh, and the reason why we chose the first Monday of every month and expressively Monday is because usually meet will happen on the weekend and people might have a situation they've encountered. This will be a forum for them to bring up something that they may have had to deal with and weren't quite sure how to go about dealing with it, having dealt with it, but on second thought, they'd like to discuss it. So we thought that might be a good time to have it. So is everyone good with the frequencies?
So that does it mean that next one will be February 7th?
Yeah, something like that. If that works for folks. I'm just looking, sorry, I'm going back and forth on the chat. Okay, so if there are no objections, if there are, or people are really, if there's an issue, just let us know. But we were thinking once a month, if you guys wanted to do it every 3 weeks, we could do that as well. But we figured with, if indoor gets going, then people might get a little bit busier. So we can start off with one once a month. Next, I assume, and this I don't know, is the meeting being recorded?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Yes, it is. Lisa, it is, but the problem is Athletics Canada is in the process of redoing their website. The official section of the website is not up and running yet. So yes, these are being recorded, but we don't have any way of accessing them.
Okay. I'm going to assume that we can probably, well, I'll talk to Serge about it, because either way we can get the recordings to folks or make them available, or we'll get some notes out to folks as well. So we just want to make sure that people have a chance to, if they're looking for something and they want to review something, they have an opportunity. Okay.
Right,
And
Lisa, the intention is to put them up on the website so people can access them later. And hopefully they will be up and running on the website.
okay, can I ask a question about that as far as privacy goes? Will it be password protected?
No,
That I can't answer, but, oh, there's Serge. He can answer it for you right now.
the answer is no.
Is that poses a problem, actually, Serge? I don't know that people necessarily want this out in the public or videos of themselves out in the public. I'm not sure what other people feel like, but I'm not crazy about that. Is there a way to have a password protected section for the officials?
It depends on what the, sorry, Serge.
No, go ahead.
It's Becca. So my background is in websites. Depending on what the content management system that Athletics Canada uses, there is a way that they can create a password protective section, but that would be a discussion that you'd have to have with Athletics Canada. So I'm willing to help with that discussion because this is stuff that I'm very familiar with. And so I know that there are ways of putting a password protection access on a website, but it depends on what the content management system is that Athletics Canada uses. So
I guess we'll have that conversation with them directly then. Okay. Then lastly, Ian, can you flip to the last slide? So we have a survey that we are going to be sending out right after the call. It'll have a list of these topics. And what we're asking folks to do is just take 2 minutes and check off the things they're interested in. And at the bottom of the survey, it actually has a space for you guys to put in additional things that you might like to do. And they could be activities, they could be areas of interest, or they could be just a topic, whether it's, World Championships participation, or, Jane was at the Olympics, and I know she did a presentation on that, what that might be like. I mean, those are the types of things, if people are interested in something, we want to hear about it. Okay, so we're going to send that out after the call. So just look in your mailbox either later on tonight or tomorrow, and hopefully we'll get some feedback. Okay. Okay, I think that's, oh, sorry, Brian Kidney's hand. Sorry, go ahead, Brian.
Why can't the video or the audio of our conversation this evening just be sent to us? Why does it have to be on the Athletics Canada website?
I think that's a question for Jane or Serge to answer.
Because there's people or not, you want to listen to the other video or the same size as we did last year with all the training going on. That means that's open to anyone to want to connect and to review their video.
Speaking of video, I have a question. That video that Dennis or Ian showed earlier was probably very good, but it was a little glitchy because seeing it over Zoom. Maybe the videos could be sent by email ahead of time.
I think that file was quite large, and
Okay.
what we're doing is actually we've created a Google Drive box for the starters. So we're going to just upload the videos because I know people are interested in seeing them and studying them. So if we'll get that up there and we'll provide access to folks that way. Any other questions?
Yeah, with regards to the video, they're too big to email, so they need to be on some kind of shared drive.
Yeah, so we'll do that. We'll get that up there for you guys and invite everyone to the Drive box or Drive, whatever it's called, Google Drive. Any other questions before we shut everything down?
Thanks very much for doing this.
Can I, this gun is a 209 Alpha.
Oh,
Is there anybody in Canada who can do the inner work that this gun needs? I've been waiting since the middle of July for the folks in Aurelia, Ontario, and I am nowhere. Either that or we'll have to go with electronic or something. Anybody help? Rev Ken Searle at shaw.ca. I hope to find some place for it to actually be fixed.
You will probably find that it can't be fixed because it is a cast metal gun. And you're probably contacting Elwood Epps.
Yeah, that's who I sent.
And he will tell you the same thing. They'll replace the gun, but Alpha is running out of parts. You know, there's such a demand for their guns, and it's not actually manufactured by Alpha, which is a kind of strange thing.
If anybody has a better gun or something, then because I'm thinking that maybe electronic is the way we'll have to go if we can't get these guns fixed.
Well, I thought you guys were going electronic, weren't you?
We hadn't really decided in Kamloops, but we may, whatever. Anyway, thank you. Thank you.
No worries. Okay, folks. So going forward, what we'd like to do is try and keep the calls to about 45 minutes and to be very succinct. We do want your participation, as I mentioned earlier, and we do want your feedback. And to figure out activities, we thought about maybe a luncheon session every month where people can chime in over their lunch hour with a level 5 starter. And if they have situations they've encountered, if they want to run it by them, we could try to arrange something like that. So if you guys have any ideas or any thoughts about how we can interact as a group, we would love to hear them. Okay. So with that, I'm going to sign off. Thanks very much, Serge, and Jane. Thanks for joining us. And
you can unmute now.
Okay.
Myself.
You guys take care, and hopefully we'll see you guys fairly soon. Okay.
Thanks, Lisa.
Take care, guys.